Welcome to the FilmGamer podcast. This is episode number 46 overall, season 4, episode 12. Let's get right into it. First off, I wanted to memorialize Remembrance Day or what have you. It's not a holiday, it's a commemoration. And, a lot of times people forget that people all over the world and all of their countries at some point had to fight for their country, or their veterans, their armies, their armed forces had to. So I just wanted to shout out with respect, because it's also Veterans Day in the U.S. Here we call it Remembrance Day. I wanted to shout out and support our troops wherever you may be. My grandfather was a World War I veteran, and similar to John Mulaney's grandfather was too old to serve in World War II. But I appreciate his service, and I appreciate any other Canadian member of the armed forces who has served our country. So thank you. Moving on to this will be the third and final part of my dissection of the Joe Rogan podcast. Dissection is a pretty generous word for it, but I didn't get to finish the J.D. Vance interview, and I started a bit of the Theo Von one, but it kind of stopped it. I don't need to, and I don't like it when people interview people who run other podcasts, who run other TV shows. It's like a hat on a hat, okay? The person already interviews people, so they're therefore not a celebrity. They're what I call a personality, okay? These are people like your Ryan Seacrest, like your Howard Stern, like your Chris Wallace. I'm just naming him right now because his contract at CNN is up. He was at Fox News for a while, did CNN for 3 years, and now he's leaving. He said he'd go into the podcast space because that's where the action is at, referring to mostly Jon Stewart and others. So welcome to the podcast space, Chris Wallace, and you are welcome to be on my podcast anytime. Continuing on, I finished the J.D. Vance interview with Joe Rogan, and I was just kind of amazed how much this interview turned around in its second half. Once J.D. Vance got comfortable talking about subjects that he knew about and was able to give information, J.D. Vance is kind of like a machine. He is able to convey complex thoughts and ideas, many of which align with the Republican Party of the United States, distill them down to their simplest elements and explain them to, somebody like your average Joe, in this case, Joe Rogan. I guess I was just really impressed by his handle on immigration, not that he's done anything about immigration, but just that he had a strict point of view and was coming from a strong point of view about immigration. And it's like, here's the problem, because he was able to explain why he didn't vote for the so-called bipartisan border bill, and was able to give specific references onto why he didn't want to vote for it, and how boundaries were redrawn, and why it wasn't really bipartisan to him. And I just found that really fascinating, much more fascinating than Joe Rogan interviewing him on many issues that, listen, I've said before that Joe Rogan isn't an expert, nor does he claim to be. So it's kind of annoying when, he mentions like a women's pool tournament where two guys play, or a 50-year-old man swimming with teenage girls, or throws out stuff like autogynephilia or something like that. And that really annoyed me, particularly in the first half of Joe Rogan's interview with J.D. Vance. And I figured that they were looking at the argument in terms of trans people all wrong, because they're addressing the issue on the bounds of exclusivity. So like keeping people out in a way that to me is like very unnatural of how like the world works. Like people don't screen for terrorists at airports. They screen for things that terrorists would do, like weapons and stuff like that. Like, you can't single out a person in a crowd. You have to single out like a type of person. Anyway, so I don't go down the river because I promised myself I wouldn't this time. I wanted to just explain because I wrote it down. Gender fluid people are excluding women from being able to play in sports. That's a genuine concern. That's their argument. But my thing is that if I don't make the team, me as a guy, if I don't make the team because some guy who happens to be a woman is better than me and they make it, is it their fault for trying? Let me explain. When I was in elementary school, I tried out for, I think it was the men's basketball team. And the teacher who was in charge of training was a woman. And she cut us all, and she cut the people who were cut. She like sat down and said, "Hey, just to let you know, you're not going to make the team." And it's funny to me because I was like, okay, this is like lame. Like, I didn't care that much about joining the basketball team or whatever. Looking back on it, it's kind of funny because it's the most anybody has ever cared about me being on a sports team or not. So thank you, Mademoiselle Hartley, although they don't say Mademoiselle anymore. Thank you, Ms. Hartley, who I think is married now. Good for her. For caring about whether or not I make the team. My argument here to relate back to Joe Rogan is this, that there are people on every team in sports who try out and are not good enough. And I, as a guy, am not the, best person on the team, me, myself. And there are plenty of other guys who are bigger, stronger, and more talented than me who made the team. Is it their fault for being better than me or succeeding more? No. But let's, bring in the trans argument here. Is it their fault for trying? No. The concern about, guys, so-called guys, coming into women's sports and dominating, I get that. But it's the official's fault for lacking accountability, What is the UFC doing in their rule book to prevent the same thing Joe is talking about from happening in their sport? Because there are things that they can do to, change the rule book to make sure that we're not just going around pointing at people and be like, you can't be there. Like, Iman Khalif from earlier this year at the Olympics won the Olympic gold in women's boxing. She has XY chromosomes, which men have, but she was still assigned female at birth, has identified as female her whole life, and no one's really questioned it. So she's won gold now already. Is the International Olympic Committee going to make a rule, saying that nobody with XY chromosomes can participate? Because that'd be a very hard, clear line, not revoke Iman Khalif's medal because she earned it. But, my question is, if they're so concerned, if people are really concerned, what is being done about it in the rule book to prevent? Because there are things that can be done. Like, we talk about having discussions all the time, or at least Joe does. And what bothers me is that there's a lot of discussion, but very little action on it. If people really cared enough, you could demand action on it, but it's just all talk. There are people who just want the smoke. They want the controversy. They want attention. The Paul brothers, Logan and Jake, are very much like that. They don't really care about the system or the rules or anything like that, although I am looking forward to their fight against Mike Tyson this week. I believe it's Logan, and Jake is the younger one. On Netflix. I have a Netflix subscription still, so I'm looking forward to that. But he, or that family, was instrumental in spreading like fake news against Iman Khalif and stuff like that, to the point where people who had genuine concern about the issue joined in, and then were given the wrong information. And that's always so frustrating to me when people don't own that, when they don't own that they were, wrong when being supposedly concerned about an issue. So, just the way all of these conversations taking place bother me is because there are so very few people who are serious about having these kinds of discussions. People want to get mad, and then, if you point out flaws in their argument, they're like, well, I was just saying, or I wasn't being serious, or I was joking. And it's how do we just eliminate those people from the argument because they're not here to be serious? And that, to me, just makes the whole conversation so exhausting, I'll circle back around to this issue a bit when I go to my Letterboxd most recent, because my most recent movie that I've seen is a documentary following someone around who is trans. But that's enough. That's enough for this. Jake Paul is getting sued for, spewing lies, as he should. And, I'm not sure if we'll see the end of it or what it will entail, but whatever, just be accountable. The other thing about that interview, and this is more towards Joe, and I'll try not to criticize him much further because this is the end of my 3-part series, is that Joe calls Apple woke, and I don't consider Apple woke. Woke to me is aware and current and stuff like that. To me, they're woke for a technology company is innovation. It's, the reason Joe Rogan is calling Apple woke is for 2 reasons. Number one, they're liberal Democrats, so they donate to the Democratic Party. And 2, because Tim Cook is gay. I doubt that was a real, I'm sure the number 1 thing is the first thing I said about, donating to Democrats and stuff like that. But, because you can be Republican and woke. I would consider the movie Rebel Ridge a Republican movie, believe it or not. I can't really get into why I feel that way, just that I feel that way. And I find it really woke. I find the films of S. Craig Zahler, who's a Republican, or at least has Republican movies. If you've ever seen Bone Tomahawk, starring Kurt Russell, and Patrick Wilson and Matthew Fox, Brawl in Cell Block 99, awesome movie starring Vince Vaughn about a guy who is a white supremacist who gets brought into a prison and then blackmailed by the warden to get transferred to another prison and find this other guy in another cell block in order to get his wife back. And then there's Dragged Across Concrete with Mel Gibson. And again, another really smart right-wing type movie. There aren't enough of those, but, people, as time moves along, are getting smart. But those are 3 movies that I would recommend. Mostly Dragged Across Concrete and Brawl in Cell Block 99, which I like even better, starring Vince Vaughn. Yes, I'd go with those. And then third, Bone Tomahawk, because Bone Tomahawk is bone dry in its first half. It is a tough sit. I remember being so close to turning it off and going away from that film when it came out. And amazingly, because it is so punishingly slow, I dragged myself through it. And then in the second half, it comes alive. And it just kind of, it's a movie that doesn't stop. It crawls along at a super slow pace, and you're like, what is this? What's going on? Why am I bothering? And then it keeps going, and it keeps going, and it doesn't stop. So, yeah, S. Craig Zahler's trilogy of Bone Tomahawk, Brawl in Cell Block 99, which is my favorite of the 3, and Dragged Across Concrete, which is my second favorite. All recommendations, all woke Republican films. So go ahead and watch those. Apple, to me, isn't woke, primarily because ever since Steve Jobs died, and Steve Jobs was an innovator, you'd call that wokeness. Ever since he died, Tim Cook has been basically just coasting off that legacy and iterating rather than innovating. And, their biggest new product launch was the Apple Vision Pro in February. And, Mark Zuckerberg, of all people, who I really don't like. Meta is probably the company I like the least. And again, if you want a breakdown of all these terrible tech companies, there's a great video on YouTube by a guy named Nakey Jakey, who's like a video game player, and he talks about how Microsoft sucks, even though he's an Xbox fan himself. Go ahead and watch that. Anyways, the Vision Pro is like $2,000 and has all these bells and whistles, but doesn't really do anything significant. And the MetaQuest 3 does a lot of things better, and way cheaper. So that's, it's amazing to me. You can watch Mark Zuckerberg, which I think about this video a lot. It's just a video of him sitting on like a bed, just talking about like why Apple Vision Pro isn't that good. And it's a rare owned by Zuckerberg, who is Zucks, in my opinion. But anyway, the amount of times in the Joe Rogan interview that JD has to kind of dismiss Joe, saying that JD himself doesn't know what he's talking about and Joe is unable to follow up with specifics, demonstrates to me that Joe didn't really prepare for JD's interview as much as he did Donald Trump's, it seems. And, it's a good example, as good as JD comes off in this interview. It's an example of why I would rather not have him interview any more politicians, just because I don't think that's Joe's strength, and I don't think it's really in the spirit of the Joe Rogan Experience. But I would change my mind, I guess, if I saw him interview like a Democrat, like maybe AOC or Joe Biden, which I know would be impossible, or even Kamala, which I honestly think would help things. Like, it would give an honest understanding, because the election happened and Kamala lost, and I was surprised somewhat. I mean, I was surprised at the outcome, yes, but I was surprised at how many people talked about like why they didn't like Kamala, and there are many like reasons not to. Their campaign was inauthentic. They fought the, woke war and like lost. They were all about identity politics, and people said this is like a election about like real world issues, like of people who can't afford the basics. And when you can't afford the basics, and I hate using this phrase, but put food on the table, it's a privilege to worry about identity politics. And that's just basically an idea that the Democratic Party has forgotten about. And I would say that that symptom is honestly best represented by them getting rid of Joe Biden, because they got rid of Joe Biden because of an identity issue. They were like, this old man isn't cool enough, for us. He's not cool enough for George Clooney. He's not cool enough for Damon Lindelof and all of these donors and stuff. And they basically kicked him out of the cool kids club. And, the election day rolls around, and Joe anybody who's like in the middle of Arkansas or whatever, the one person in, I saw a county, there were 2 people who voted Republican and 2 people who voted Democrat. And it was, people were like, I'd like to go to that county of 4 people and see that. Now it's registered voters who are voting. But, by the way, the whole idea of voter registration is odd to me. You should just be able to show up, give ID, and then, do that. I mean, you have to give ID at, if you don't have a voter card already, and at Canadian elections. So, anyways. Oh, and by the way, I was thinking about it, and if I were prime minister, this is kind of controversial, but I would make it so that you can only hold 2 citizenships rather than like 4 or 5, which some countries have. Yeah, I mean, there are some, like I think Germany, who like make it where you can only hold one, or maybe that's Italy or something like that. I wouldn't go that far, but like it's like two identities, okay, one for, each parent or where you were born, but like I'm not a fan of inherited citizenship. I understand why smaller countries do it, but it's like, oh, my mom was born here, my father was born here, and I was born in a different place. And it's like, it I don't get it. Like, I don't get the idea that like because your parents were from someplace you automatically get citizenship. But that's how, I believe Canada does it that way. That's how a lot of people do it. But if I were in charge, I'd make it, it's like, okay, you can have Canada and US citizenship, or Canada and British citizenship and stuff. But you can't have like Canada, British, and German or whatever citizenship. Is that arbitrary? I don't think so, because it's, you have to really nail down, at least for tax purposes and stuff, like where you are and stuff. And I'm not a fan of a lot of people, and this is mostly coming down to celebrities who basically identify part of their identity from like, here's what I'll say. I have to name names, and this isn't against them, but I'm just using them as an example. But like Christopher Nolan, for example, British guy, grew up in Britain, raised in Britain. Where has he been for the last like 10 years? He's been in America. He's made British movies. Like he made Dunkirk. That's as British as it gets. To be more British, it would be British. Like The Darkest Hour is a more British movie on the same topic, and it's funded American. But like the last 10 years, he's lived in LA. Ryan Reynolds, Canadian, but like lives in LA. It's mostly like an LA thing. Is the bothersome thing of like, oh, I'm Canadian, but I also live and pay taxes in America. I don't really intend to return. But what do I know? I'm open to having my mind changed. So if you have any thoughts, let me know on that. Yeah. I played a video game and completed a video game this week. It is the first one I played since a few weeks ago when I beat Doom Eternal, and I appreciate really getting back into the swing of things. Now I'm wondering, okay, which one do I go to next? So I played Silent Hill Shattered Memories, and now I have Affordable Space Adventures, which is a downloaded game that I'm already part way through, so I might continue with that. And then I have Mad World, which is only a few hours long. I'd like to get into that, and I didn't pay for that as much as I did Shattered Memories. I paid $100 to play Silent Hill Shattered Memories, which was a game. It came out. It's a quote-unquote reimagining, although apparently they did that just to get the game greenlit, of the original Silent Hill, about a guy who wakes up in a car accident in the middle of a snowstorm, and his name is Harry Mason. He's looking for his daughter Cheryl, and he has to walk through the town of Silent Hill to find out where she's gone missing to, and in doing so you figure out about the history of the town and face psychological horrors. The fascinating thing about it is that you're given no weapon through this entire game, except you're given a flashlight. And enemies can, hear you. You can hear them when your walkie-talkie or phone or whatever gets staticky, which means you're closer to the enemies. And you got to run from them. And there are these danger zones called like nightmares, where you're walking through the town in the middle of a snowstorm, and then all of a sudden the town starts to get covered in ice and freeze over. And that lets you know that there are enemies around. And it's a fascinating mechanic. I really enjoyed playing it once I got to, because I had to play it close with the Wii sensor bar, and that was a bit of a pain, but it was fun. It's a game from 2009. It was ported to the PlayStation 2 and PSP, but it was made for the Nintendo Wii. So, I had a PS3 and Xbox 360, so there were all these games like that in Mad World that I never got to play. Super Mario Galaxy is another one that I played a little bit of, but that one I play with my nephew, and it doesn't quite feel right playing without him. But he doesn't want to play because he finds the galaxy boring. Can you believe that? Anyway, I enjoyed the game. It was short. It's about 7 hours. I played a bit longer than most. I found the ending underwhelming because it's one of those rug pulls where, I mean, the whole time you know that there's going to be a rug pull. It's Silent Hill, so most of them you're exploring the town, which is, almost metaphorical to your psyche or whatever. And then, you find some twist, which is something that the character was hiding from themselves all along. That's the basic formula for Silent Hill. And I was wondering, it's like, okay. And I came up in my mind of like, what could this character that I'm playing as be hiding? And I noticed certain things like the therapist. There's a therapist section at the end of every chapter. You like draw a picture or you put together a graph or something like using the pointer, and you're asked questions which affect, the colors of the walls, in the game, or, how certain characters dress when they're introduced and stuff like that. And I started to wonder, it's like, oh, this guy kind of looks like me. I wonder if, is there something to that? The character is slowly changing into someone as the game goes on. They're changing their clothes and stuff. Does that mean anything? All the supporting characters are female. Does that mean anything? And it sort of did, but not in any remarkable way that I was expecting. So I was like disappointed in that. Do I regret spending $100 on this game? No, because I'm a gamer at heart. I had the money. I always wanted to play this game. This was the only way that I could play it. And, it has a cool cover. So I might even make that my cover for this week's episode of the podcast. But it's a fun, little nifty game. The writer and creator of it, Sam Barlow, went on to make an acclaimed game called Her Story, where you look through VHS interview tapes, like interrogation tapes and security camera footage and stuff, and you try and piece together like what happened in like a murder or something like that. It was highly acclaimed. You can see it on Steam, and it's apparently really worth playing. And I'm talking like one of the top 10 games of the last 10 years. People are talking about Her Story and stuff. And this is before things got woke, keep in mind. So it was just kind of like, hey, remember when, things were different but like good? Now, people would throw a label on it regardless. And, that's what annoys me about something is like, okay, Letterboxd last 4. I watched Harper and Will, or Will and Harper as it's called. And it's about Will Ferrell and his one of his writing partners or writing friends from Saturday Night Live who got hired the same week, Harper Steele. And she comes out to Will Ferrell as trans. And he's like, do I really know this person or something like that? And kind of has to reevaluate their friendship. So they like to reacquaint, they go on a road trip across America. And, I love road trip movies. I like the concept. I've always wanted to go on a road trip myself, maybe ever since the movie Road Trip, I don't know. But the main point of this movie is just Harper going into places she has been before as a man, and then awkwardly chatting with the people and saying, hey, I used to be a man, but I'm a woman now, and I don't feel so comfortable here. And then there's polite awkwardness and stuff. And then they're like, oh, is this awkward? Hey, Will Ferrell, come in. And then Will Ferrell comes in, and mostly people don't really recognize him at all, which is kind of funny. It's another example of like how out of touch outside of cities the world is. It's like a whole another world cut off. I mean, you can look at the electoral map and see that. That's why, people voted for a guy who just says what's on his mind all the time. There's no rehearsal, and, that matters more to people than, being prepared or anything like that, who did people want to hang out with after the debate? The guy who had like the zingy one-liners and didn't try too hard and was relaxed, or the person who was like the ace student and like worked really hard and like was always super prepared more than anyone, And then, looking back, though, that person didn't have as many friends as, like, the guy who didn't try too hard and was, like, relaxed and made everybody laugh. So, yeah, it's no surprise that, like, in hindsight, that, America voted as it did. And again, like, not only do they have the same tired communication strategy they have from, like, the Clinton administration, it seems, they also are carrying the terrible thing which proved it didn't work in 2016 of celebrity endorsements, which historically have always proven not to be very effective. But it worked with Obama, so, that kind of thing. And now people are joking like, the U.S. is going to abolish term limits, which they instituted for Dwight Eisenhower. No, FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Because he did 4 terms, and people were like, "Oh, okay, let's have a 2-term mandate," and they were able to pass a constitutional amendment, which to me seems crazy now, like getting that through Congress. But for those counting at home, there are 3 levels of government: legislative, executive, and judicial. Now, right now, for the remainder of his term, Joe Biden is just appointing a bunch of judges, which is what most of them do in their lame duck session, which is like the point in Congress where the election has been called and there's like 2 months before inauguration as the, other administration gets prepared. But there's the White House where you can sign executive orders, and that's how things get done. And, you do a lot of ceremonial stuff. And then there is Congress, that U.S. House of Representatives, where there's things can get passed with, 51%. But there are many things which don't need a review that if they get over 218 seats, then they can basically do everything and pass certain bills which need super majorities. And, because I guess if something's like at 51, people can filibuster it or something like that. If you see Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, a very boring movie. But anyways, the United States Republican Party is coming in on 218 seats for the Republicans. And they have about 205 right now for the Democrats. So they're at 214, and the Democrats are at 205. And so there's a few more seats. I'm pretty sure that and I guess these are the projections, and then they just adjust or something like that. They're getting pretty close to it. But anyways, I don't know how many seats are left to be counted. I thought there was 538, but that's like 100 more. 435. Blah, blah, blah. That's what it's at. Yeah. However, the number was increased from 1951 until 63 to 437, following the admissions of Alaska and Hawaii to the Union. Yes. In addition, 5 non-voting delegates. Yeah, we don't care about those. No offense to D.C., Guam, Virgin Islands, Northern Mariana Islands, and American Samoa. But anyways, so we have currently 435. So we are currently at 419. So there are 16 seats left. And of those 16, the Republicans only have to win a quarter of them in order to have a mass majority. And so they will have, I think it's called a bulwark, honestly, which the title of that Warren Beatty film makes way more sense now, where he plays a U.S. senator in California who just acts crazy during the last little bit of his campaign while the votes are being counted. No, I want the definition, not the stupid news organization. I don't like the name Bulwark. A defensive wall. That's what that means. Oh, I see. That makes sense. An extension of a ship's sides above the level of the deck. So it's a solid perimeter. So I cannot remember the last time this happened, but there's the U.S. House of Representatives, which introduces a bill, and then the Senate, basically confirms it, and then the White House signs it. So, for example, Barack Obama, lost the House after the midterms in his first term. I'm not sure if he ever got it back, but he was able to sign executive orders. And then, Joe Biden had executive orders that he could make, and the Senate, a majority in the Senate, so he could pass that. But in order for bills to be introduced and passed at the lower level, it was difficult because the Republicans had the majority. So he had to make a lot of compromises, which he was surprisingly good at. But, at the same time, he's very experienced. So I guess he shouldn't be that surprising. Trump is going to have a majority in the House to introduce bills, the Senate to confirm them, and then he'll be able to sign them. So basically, anything that the Republicans introduce, provided it's not too crazy. For example, I learned that suspectedly, things like wanting to make Elon Musk, who's South African, a member of Trump's cabinet, the Republican Party isn't going to go for that. They're just no. We're not going to hand over that kind of power to a foreign dude who's weird, no matter how much money he has or no matter how much you like him. That's just not happening because obviously, Elon Musk being the world's richest man does not need the United States government to get a lot of stuff done. It gives him a lot of extra power, but he can do a lot without them. The U.S. government depends on, Elon Musk companies. I know SpaceX, they have a few contracts with them. They also might have a few Tesla contracts. I'm not sure. I can look it up, but maybe you guys can get back to me on that. But they have a lot of contracts with companies Musk owns. So that would be very, beneficial to him. But, he needs them less than they need him. So giving over that level of power to him is not something that they want to do. They want to hold that as a trump card over them. So, and then the other thing that's funny is somebody suggested that Trump is going to get annoyed of Elon Musk fast because apparently Elon Musk has been at Mar-a-Lago every single day with him, helping him confirm appointments and stuff like that. It's always funny to me because it's who's going to suck up to who? Trump, interestingly, it doesn't seem like he sucks up to a lot of people. He'll suck up to Putin and stuff, he loves the dictators, we know that, he envies the power that they have, but anyone in America, he doesn't, suffer, I guess, for lack of a better word, and, he'll fight with anyone he doesn't care, because that's just all he's known his whole life, he's a ratings competitor, and, if somebody is getting more attention to him than he is, then he'll go after them and take them down. So, there is a proposed rumor floating around that X and Truth Social will merge. And then if that's the case, then, it will make Trump a whole lot richer, generationally for his kids and stuff. And, perhaps it will make Elon richer and turn, their fortunes around and stuff like that. And, they'll all get richer. But if you don't remember, there was a time when Trump was, of course, banned from Twitter and banned from a lot of social media. And really, they were just waiting, the whole idea of him being banned in the first place is ridiculous because they reinstated him and they're well, he's running for president now, so anything that he did gets wiped away, which is very political in a way that I don't like at all. But anyways, Silicon Valley and, Jeff Bezos, Zuckerberg and whatnot are well, we don't want him becoming president and being mad at us, so we better, let him do his thing. Which is just, they're all yellow bellies. So I know it's an old phrase, but go with me on it. Anyways, my point is this, is that, like, Elon Musk is a suck-up. Donald Trump really isn't, so I'll be fascinated. If somebody's getting sick of somebody, Donald Trump will get sick of Elon, because when Elon reinstated his account, he wasn't too anxious to come back to his Twitter account and use it again because he didn't need it anymore with Truth Social. So it'll be interesting to see. My other theory that I had was that if they were going to lose, if the Republicans were going to lose, that maybe J.D. Vance would distance himself from Trump come October. Now they've won, and if anybody out there is just curious, and this is just a hypothetical, and I've floated this down the line, that, like, the only person really who could outshine Trump at this point is J.D. Vance. And, you saw it with Vivek Ramaswamy, where, Vivek, who has a lot of money, and not as much as Trump apparently, but, like, he wanted to get in there, but he was basically like a mini Trump while Trump wasn't there. And then, he ended up not being liked. He was too loud and stuff like that. And, we haven't seen him with Trump a whole lot since, since he dropped out and suspended his campaign and endorsed Trump. And I think because Trump sees him as a threat, and, Trump's not going to allow somebody who can surpass him, go anywhere near him. But he's attached at the hip with J.D. Vance. And if J.D. Vance wanted to betray him and, become president himself, he would only have to wait 2 years. And the reason I say that is because if you serve less than 2 years as president, fulfilling someone else's term, then it doesn't count as a full term. So he could serve less than 2 years as president if he stabbed Donald Trump in the back and, like, turned him into the police or something crazy like that. Is like, oh, I have documents, this, that, the other thing, convinces the House and impeaches them and stuff like that. I don't think J.D. Vance would do that, but, like, I'm just, again, this is purely theoretical, hypothetical kind of thing. And again, I'm not hoping for it or anything like that, because we all want this boat to run smoothly. So what could happen is, like, after 2 years, there's less than half the term left. So J.D. Vance could take over and still run 2 consecutive terms after that. And the reason that he would do that would be he would, like, be the longest president, provided that he wins and stuff like that. Like, winning 2 elections in a row is, like, crazy. Anyways, I just thought I'd bring that up, because J.D. Vance is the only one that can basically threaten Donald Trump at this point, because he's smarter than Donald Trump. He's younger and more energetic than Donald Trump, so, it's like, Macbeth taking out King Duncan, basically, to use, an obvious literary metaphor. Anyways, moving on, past politics, we will get to the top 10 box office. This weekend, for the 3rd weekend in a row, somewhat unexpectedly, is Venom: The Last Dance, a movie my older brother, well, I have 3 older brothers, but my middle older brother tells me is terrible, unsurprising. The first one wasn't that good. The second one was, like, honestly, I liked it. It was, like, a solid movie. It wasn't good, but it was, like, entertaining. And apparently the third one isn't that great along those lines. But, most people with the Venom movies, they either like them all, or, I've heard some people, it's like they like the first one but hate the second one. But I don't know, they all make money the same. However, interestingly, this one opened a lot lower than the previous two. I honestly think because it takes place in the daytime, so that didn't look as visually exciting. It didn't up the stakes a whole lot from the second one. It's hard to compete with Carnage because that's like the main baddie. But despite that, a few things went in its favor. Number one, there isn't a lot of competition, which, again, this befuddles me, but Hollywood, I guess, didn't schedule any major releases for this weekend because of the election, and they thought, I guess, people were going to be too busy with the election or something and not go to the movies, which is like, what? Like, people are busy with Christmas, and that's the busiest day in the movie theaters of the year. It's like the one thing where people are like, let's all go. It's like it's 2 hours out of your day. Like, there's no time that's not busy to go to. Like, if you are operating a theater and you opened in a city and had showtimes for movies during the day, and I mean like from when people drop their kids off to before 3 o'clock, like people would go to the movies. Let's say you could finish a movie by 2:30, and then, you know, like there are a few 12:30 showings and stuff like that. But like if you did that, people would like go to the movies way more often. So movie theaters need to open a bit earlier now. But Venom, the World Series, which people were really looking forward to, and was slightly underwhelming because the Yankees got their ass kicked in 5 games, so it didn't stretch into very many weekends. That ended up working in Venom's favor because that was really its only competition. And because the World Series ended, I would say, earlier than expected and stuff, Venom was able to play for like 3 weeks now. And there hasn't really been any weirdly major tentpoles now for like 2 weekends in a row. Like in previous years, Marvel movies opened on this date, or like there was like adult thrillers and stuff. This year they just didn't, partially because of the strike, slowed product down, although we're finally getting past that because Deadpool paused because of the strike and then came out in July. But it's like, it's still a bit of a thin calendar this year, although now we have like the major tentpoles of, we have Sonic 3, we have Gladiator 2, we have Wicked, which reviewed well. We have Gladiator 2, also the reviews for that came out today. Real reviews, by the way, and it reviewed well. And then you have Mufasa the Lion King, which I saw like 10 seconds of, and then I'm like, no, I don't want to see this ugly animation style, and I saw the Lion King already, so I have no interest. Although the concept of like Mufasa being a usurper is kind of like an interesting thing, interrogating the concept of family and making for like an interesting plot wherein Mufasa is like adopted and then assumes the throne, when, you know, the reality of a lion cub is that like a pack of lions, it's just that whoever's the strongest, regardless of who's related to who, is the one that's like the head of the herd. But anyways, number 2 at the box office, because Venom is doing okay, but again, slightly less than the last one. That's pretty much all I can say about it. Is Heretic, a movie that I stood in line for 2 hours at TIFF for, and then couldn't get in. I was trying to get into Anora, and then I couldn't get into that, so I'm like, I'll go see Heretic. And then 2 hours ahead, and Heretic was full, so I'm like, okay. It's funny how many TIFF movies I've seen. I did see another TIFF movie I went to the theaters for this week. I guess I'll bring it up now. Conclave. This is a movie about an election. I saw it on election day, and it's about electing the next pope. And it's kind of fascinating because it goes into the politics of, you know, who votes for who and why and how. And, you know, is it the right time? It's like, of course, you have the people who are ambitious enough to become pope. And then you have like the guy who's the perfect choice, but he doesn't really sure if he wants to do it. And then you have the guy who quietly wants to be pope, but doesn't want anybody to know that, so appears very humbly. Then you have the shady guy, what's going on? You have a guy with a scandal and stuff. It was really fascinating because I was led to believe that it was just like a boring Oscar bait movie. And what I forgot was the technical expertise of the director Edward Berger, who did All Quiet on the Western Front, a movie I did not like at all. Like its 3 dubstep notes of a score, winning best score over John Williams, drove me nuts. The fact that it had a path to Easy Street because it was made by Netflix or bought by Netflix, so it had unlimited money for an Oscar campaign. And see that it was a remake of a Best Picture winner, and it was a World War movie. So that's always like Oscar bait all the way around. So that year ended up where Everything Everywhere All at Once won. This movie ended up winning 4 technical awards. Best International Feature, because it's all in German, Best Cinematography, Best Score, and Best Production Design. Which, Netflix paid for those, because it's like easy somewhat to win the technical category if you just, drown it out with a lot of money, in my opinion. Like, they will go after any Oscars they can, Netflix. But none of their movies last, still, in my opinion. But anyways, it impressed a lot of people, All Quiet on the Western Front. And then Edward Berger was being eyed to direct the next Jason Bourne movie and stuff like that. And I find that he's technically very well done, but he doesn't grab you emotionally. You don't get emotionally invested in the interior lives of his characters. You just kind of follow them around. So I find him like kind of cold and removed. Yeah, it'll be interested to see how that goes out. His next movie stars Colin Farrell and Tilda Swinton, and it's a psychological thriller. It is a Netflix movie. I don't know when it's coming out. They filmed last summer, and it's based on a book. Novel of the same name, and it's about a gambler and con artist who flee Britain for Macau. Macau? I'll say Macau. Anyways, I went and saw Conclave, and I thought about writing a review for it. I didn't, or at least haven't yet. I just like the symmetry of seeing a movie about the election of another election on election day for the U.S. And one thing I forgot about Oscar bait movies is just how well done they can be in the technical areas. Like the costumes were good, the makeup was good. It had a convincing enough wig on John Lithgow, who we all know is bald. But yeah, I found it funny. I summed it up on my social media page as a movie where Lord Farquaad and Lord Voldemort are in the running to be the next pope in the College of Cardinals. And you have Stanley Tucci sitting right there, who still doesn't think he's as good as these guys. He's like, I don't know if I'm good enough to be pope. But it's like, well, these people are running, It's like these guys are basically Hitler and they're running. And the guy's like, yeah. And it's like, well, we want him to win, right? And they're like, yeah. And then it's like, okay, well, then we have to calm down on the, progressive front of, what you want to do. And the guy's like, I don't know. I don't want to be sneaky. And it's like, the man clearly hasn't seen the movie Lincoln. Steven Spielberg's Lincoln, because that whole movie is about, like, you kind of got to be a little sneaky to get stuff done, because if you're doing all right, then you don't have to worry. Anyways, number 2 is Heretic. It made $11 million. Not the biggest per theater average, but hey, it's, these A24 movies, they're not too expensive, so they can afford to make less money. I'm always fascinated when a movie is like, it doesn't have a really strong opening, and it doesn't have a good per theater average, but because it's made enough money and cost a bit less, it doesn't matter that, like, the theaters themselves aren't that full. I find that funny. So it reviews well. I wasn't super into it. I don't like these A24 kind of, I'll call them puzzle box horror movies, because they're like thrillers, and again, I haven't seen Heretic, but they're like thrillers where there's a lot of, you're wondering about what's happening. This movie cost less than 10 million, so it's already in close to the black. So that's good for it. Number 3, a well-reviewed Christian film from the creator of The Chosen, which is a religious biblical adaptation. TV show. They release a lot of episodes in theaters every few months, and church groups go and see it. This is called The Best Christmas Pageant Ever, and the reviews for it are good. There aren't too many famous people in it. There's Judy Greer, who, character actress, always plays the best friend in a rom-com. There's Pete Holmes, who fumbled a bit. He was on an unsuccessful sitcom about bowling. He was on a show where he played a pot dealer. I think that was an HBO show. He's a comedian, really well liked. Anyway, he has a role in it. He's always like kind of the hapless dad when you do see him in these movies, which is what he appears to be playing here. And then the woman from Gilmore Girls, whose name I always forget. Give me a second here, because again, this was something that I remember if my brain hadn't been fried by, the second COVID shot. Ha ha ha. Because that was one thing that JD Vance said that stuck with me, where I'm like, I wonder if that's what, or it's just the degradation of social skills, or it's just me getting old, as in like past 25, where things are already starting to go in the opposite direction and stuff. But it was Lauren Graham, which isn't an easy name to remember. It's kind of a forgettable name, if anything. But she nominates herself to be the head of the Christmas pageant and decides to put it on. Yeah, it's just a simple Christmas movie, which William Bibiani, for the rap, I don't really like that website, but he's like, one of the best holiday movies in a long time. Intelligent and thoughtful film, but the true meaning of Christmas and how easy it is for anyone, even true believers, to get caught up in the superficial trappings and lose sight of what's important. There haven't been really anybody that I really like who has reviewed this, and I'm like, oh, I love everything this person like. There are far too many now movie critics who are, just basically there for, they're in a magazine and they're all about, a movie's Oscar chances, or they're all about getting in their review early so that they can be the first one to affect the score on Rotten Tomatoes. Very few of them offer thoughtful analysis, but Jesse Hassinger, who I don't mind, wrote a negative review, gave it a 4.2 out of 10, said, the whole movie has that faith-based fakeness, right down to the royalty-free guitar riff meant to evoke Joan Jett's bad reputation without paying for it, or the would-be homey shot of hot chocolate mugs that manages to look repulsive. I haven't seen the movie. That seems a bit nitpicky to me. I will say, watching the movie trailer, it doesn't look cheap. Catholic, Christian, faith-based movies tend to look cheap a lot of the time. So I just really appreciate some craft coming into it, because it's like, if you're being put out in the world, I'd like for something to be at least done well. You want professionalism to be on display, regardless of what the subject matter is, because then it gives you something to admire. So, Jesse Hassinger, I follow him on Twitter. He did for AV Club. Edward Douglas, I never agree with. He's on The Weekend Warrior. He seems to hate everything and like everything I hate. If it can put this cranky old Jew into the Christmas spirit, I imagine it will go over well with Goyim kiddies as well. I don't know whether that's positive. And anyone else that I know that I can look at. Pete Hammond likes everything. So, good for those people. Good for people who like every single movie, especially ones that suck. I would say my Twitter best friend, Rachel Wagner of rachelsreviews.net, shout out to Rachel, We talk all the time on Twitter. Probably the person I talk to on Twitter the most, because Twitter is like dead internet theory. Have you heard of this? It's the idea that everyone you're talking to on the internet, particularly if you haven't met them in person, is not real. And that they're like bots filling a space. It's like existentialist theory mixed with how robots are kind of taking over, so that like when you're chatting with somebody and you're chatting with a stranger and you look at that profile pic and it's like a celebrity or an anime character, you got to wonder, is this an actual real person that I'm talking to? And you might be shocked at the idea that maybe they aren't. But Rachel seems legit and says in her positive review, I know some can feel anxiety about seeing a faith-based film, but this one does it right, and I can't imagine any religious person or Christmas celebrator disliking it. Go see it. You see, that sounds convincing to me. So I'm going to leave it at that. I want to see this movie because it opened number 3 at the box office with 10 million in over 3,000 theaters, and it's always fascinating to me. It happens a bit more and more because movies, as they spread out in their niches and stuff, there are now movies where I haven't heard of them and they make a lot of money opening weekend. You know, monoculture is disabled. So the best Christmas pageant ever, 10 million. Again, not a major per theater average, but I'm sure it cost less than 10 million. I bet. Like, there aren't any major, people in the film. Like, Lauren Graham is probably the most successful one, being on Gilmore Girls and whatnot. And I read that she has a clause in her contract that states if there's a Gilmore Girls revival while she is filming, she cannot be fired. The production has to accommodate her and pay for her while she's on that show or whatever. It's kind of interesting, you know? It's always fascinating to me what Hollywood is willing to agree to people who are like brand names, like The Rock being late, allegedly, according to the Hollywood Reporter I read today, his latest movie with Chris Evans, J.K. Simmons, Red One. He was late frequently, but everybody expected him to be late. But because he was late, he apparently added $50 million to the budget of the movie, which is just insane to me. But it's MGM paying for it, and MGM is owned by Amazon, so who cares? You know, the downside is that even for these major companies, Microsoft, for example, trillion-dollar companies, they're not going to be happy explaining at an investor call that, like, yeah, we wasted $50 million on this guy being late, you know? If they want to see things in the black, and if they don't, then they'll vote off the CEO of the next survivor, and that would be, in this case, like the CEO of the current CEO of MGM. But I'll get to that next week when Red One comes out. The budget for greatest Christmas pageant ever is 10 million, so again, it's on its way to the black already. Number 4, The Wild Robot, hanging in there. I really look forward to seeing that movie. I'm curious if it can sneak in the nominations and stuff, because like 130 million doesn't seem like a whole lot. Like, it would have been decent in like 2006. Like, it was around what B movie made. B movie, which, by the way, let me just, to be sure, if I just search B, it will be the number 1 review. There it is. The number 1 result, 126 million, and then 293 million worldwide, and it cost $150 million, which is funny. But it was like during the height of the DreamWorks era, when DreamWorks and Pixar were going head to head. Now they're not really competitors, because it's just like DreamWorks has sort of become the B team at Universal. Really, Paramount should buy them. They were always the best fit for Paramount, like DreamWorks Animated. Like, all the Shrek movies came out during that time. After that, their look deal went up, and they went to Fox for a while, for like 2012 to 2016. Didn't do a whole lot. They released like Home and Kung Fu Panda 3 that I remember. I forget the other ones, but and I still haven't seen Home. I think I started 10 minutes in and I was with the nephew and he's like, I don't want to watch this. And I'm like, okay, I won't force you, even though I want to watch it. I want to see that and Peabody and Sherman. And I want to see the bad guys, but they weren't up for it. Well, the bad guys, though, I got like 10 minutes in and I really didn't like the animation style. It like really didn't work for me, even though it was like a Reservoir Dogs redo. But I digress. The Wild Robot hanging in there really well. Everybody I know who sees it really likes it. I was really looking forward to seeing it ever since it was announced. I picked it for the Town podcast. They did like pick 4 movies or whatever. I just picked what was left over for fun. I don't even remember what I picked aside from, I think I picked The Fall Guy, The Wild Robot, Ghostbusters 4. 1, 2, Answer the Call, you exclude because it's non-canonical, Afterlife, and Frozen Empire, which sucked. But like they all played to expectations, but they didn't reach the 400 million threshold because there was nothing left. But anyway, The Wild Robot, I'm like, Dean DeBlois directed. He did, How to Train Your Dragon. And it was very much an, I know this movie is going to be good, wait till everybody sees it kind of thing. So that was really satisfying to watch people like fall in love with this movie just based on my intuition. Again, before even a trailer was released, I'm like, this will be good. And then the trailer was released, I'm like, this movie looks very good. And then it comes to Toronto. I remember I was waiting in line to see The Substance, and this one guy's like, I know you're waiting for a movie. I have a ticket right here, guaranteed for Wild Robot. Come with me, man. And I wanted to go, but I wanted to see The Substance. And I reviewed that, so, that ended up working out. Again, someday I'm going to have to kill an afternoon with my nephew, and hopefully he hasn't seen The Wild Robot then. In the meantime, I got to see, my Substance review got 306 views, so worth it. And I was also sick that morning, so it was pretty apt. I forget why I was sick, though. But anyways, moving on. To number 5, Smile 2. It's gotten decent reviews, but it's made about, it's at 60 million. The first one topped out at 105. And it's got it'll make maybe 80 million, so it'll be a slight step down from the last one. I think it'll do well on streaming. When it comes to Paramount Plus, which just hit 72 or 82 million viewers. And I paid for it a few months ago for the year, so I'm one of them. And Yellowstone came back, although it really should have been on the Paramount Plus network, but they shut down the TV network. So, and then they're like, get a recap of Yellowstone on CBS. I'm like, just put it on CBS. Like, seriously, there's nothing on traditional TV. They're letting it die. But they'll never learn. And then now they're hoping I hope that we can consolidate, the TV networks now that Trump is elected. And it's like what good would that do you? Yes, you'll collect more money, but you're not gonna put any more money into TV shows anyway. You could put that money into TV shows on broadcast now, but you're just deciding not to. So that's frustrating to me. But anyways, number 6 is Conclave. Slowly adding more theaters and stuff. Made 20 million. How much did it cost? How much did it cost? Beautiful looking movie, good gowns, good sets. They recreated the Vatican. I have to go to Conclave disambiguation. Yes. It 20 million, and it's made 20 million, so it'll have an Oscar run and stuff. This was the movie that came out and people were like, yes, this is Oscar bait, this is it. The screenplay was pretty solid, although the guy hasn't even really written much. He adapted, so what has he written? He wrote How to Lose Friends and Alienate People, a movie which is kind of bizarre, I guess, but unmemorable. I just remember Jeff Bridges, Simon Pegg, and Megan Fox being in it, but it's introduces the idea that Megan Fox could be Simon Pegg's love interest and then doesn't do anything about that, so that's lame. Men Who Stare at Goats, That's not a good screenplay. The Debt, I heard good things, but I never saw. Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, I just do not like anything Jean Le Carré did. Frank, kind of a weird, another like offbeat dramatic film. Our Brand is Crisis, which like collapsed, wasn't a well-reviewed movie. It's about like Americans fixing an election in the in Africa, and they made it into like a comedy, and it's adapted from a documentary. I kid you not. So it's like weird. It stars Sandra Bullock. It was written for George Clooney, and George Clooney was like, I'm turning this down. And if George Clooney turns down your movie because he doesn't think it's going to be good, then you really should not be in it. That's just my opinion. The Snowman was a mess. The Goldfinch was a mess. And then he writes Conclave, which is a really good screenplay. That's just funny to me. Yeah. Anyways, and then his next movie is an adaptation of a Don Winslow novel called Crime 101. And they don't give the premise at all, which is very frustrating to me because it's a known thing. Don Winslow wrote The Savages, so that's cool. Danny Ryan. Okay, well, that's, this is just, I'm running into a wall. I can't find anything on here, and I won't waste your time. So, moving on. Conclave. How did I rate it on Letterboxd? I should have had that tab open, to be honest. Can I look at my diary? Yes, I can. Okay. I gave Conclave, which, by the way, I'm talking about, I saw it on Tuesday. I've since seen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 movies. Granted, Will and Harper I had like started in September, and then I just decided to finish it now, so, that might be cheating. But like, I've seen 7 films in 5 days. I'm a madman, because I watched Conclave, and then the next day I saw 2 movies, and then half of Killer Heat, and then I watched the rest of Killer Heat, and then later that night I watched Strange Darling, and then the next day I watched the Deadpool, and then half of Josey Wales. Or maybe I finished Josey Wales in the early morning, and then today I watched finished Will and Harper. I wanted to finish The King of New York with Christopher Walken, which I started watching with my sister. Got 30 minutes in, she's like, I'm not feeling it. Let's watch something else. So we ended up watching Smokey and the Bandit, which was a great choice because that was a 4-star film. Maybe even a 5-star. I might elevate it. I don't really do that often, but anyways, that was like a really solid use, and that was a month ago. Yeah. Anyways, Conclave. This is what I had to say about it. Now I already mentioned it. Hey, it got 2 likes. Who liked it? People I already follow. Great. How many followers do I have? I never pay attention to that on like, because I don't look at Letterboxd as like a social media thing. I have 315 followers, which is like average, what I average out to on like every thing. Let's say I have a lot of bots like Twitter, so I have over like 1,300 followers on Twitter, and I have, because there's way more bots, I have 3,000 followers on TikTok. So it's like that. And then I'm at to 170 for YouTube. So, crawling up there. Or wait, no, 171, because I subscribed through my dad's YouTube account to my YouTube account. So, yeah. That movie, which I gave 4 stars because I'm like, it's just well done. You can tell the best people in the world made this movie, like in terms of craft. Like, the costume designer was doing their job. The production designer was doing their job. The screenwriter was doing his work. Like, again, and he doesn't usually write that well, but he did adapt this exceptionally well. Or could have adapted easy, because when you pick a book, and a lot of people pick up, adapt through books their screenplays, because the structure is already there, and structure is like 95%. I watched a Nerd Writer video. He's like the king of the original, movie video essay. He was actually recommended to me by my film professor, Baloo Edebri. He started like linking to the Nerd Writer about like Cronenberg and stuff, and that's where I was following him from. So now he has over 1 million followers and was one of the most famous video essayists on YouTube that you like see stuff on. And now you see a lot of crappy film video essays. I got into that a bit. I find them way too pretentious. There isn't really movies I can think of that I want to spend that much time talking about. I really can just do like full of that, I can write a review and I'll write about personally what I'm making, but it's because I want to make movies myself that I don't really want to spend that much time talking about movies. And I also want to find a new angle that's like not explored. So, that's that. But I will say on Twitter this week, I got into it with a guy because he called Conclave, you guessed it, woke. And I won't get into it because it like gets into like spoiler details and stuff. But it was funny to me because it's what I miss and like about movies is that they really, the ones that get you to have a conversation and you're both on equal footing because you're talking about something that like hasn't happened in real life. So somebody can't be like, well, this personally happened to me. It's like, no, it's fictional, and you stay on those grounds. And that's, who, that's who and how goes it. This one guy who's like annoying, there's a lot of annoying writers. He claimed that he blocked me, but like, I can see him. I don't know if that's, and there's no indication that he's blocked me. So, yeah, I don't know. The reason I don't like him, and this is just a random guy that I've fought with all the time, is like, this is amazing, and it's like, okay. And then he'll be like, oh, a lot of people are weirded out by this. And he's like, yeah, one guy disagreed or had like a vague opinion. It's like these guys are like, somebody's wrong on the internet. I got to do something. Somebody said this bad movie was bad. I got to defend it. Brandon Stressing and Sonny Birch are like that. But, it's like, okay, guys, we're all talking on Twitter here. Like, why are we getting upset? It's a privilege to be on Twitter. Okay. Yeah. What did somebody say? I'll review the X conversation. X, formerly known as Twitter. This one guy was talking about, last night I went to see the new horror movie Heretic. The theater instead played the Tom Hanks movie Here. A small number of people complained, but the majority of the theater accepted the change. Terrifying insight into human behavior. And I said, I'd stay here if I went to Heretic, and then I'd complain and get a free ticket. That's how it would be, because I'd see a Tom Hanks Zemeckis movie, even if it was weird, because I knew I could get my money back. Now, when I went to see Conclave, the picture was dim, and I know it was dim. And Roger Ebert talked about this on his review of his shows, that this has been going on for decades, where the theater will purposefully dim the bulb in order to save money down the line and show more movies. And they're like, well, Conclave is supposed to be dim. And that could very well be true. That was the case with Solo: A Star Wars Story. That's just like a super dark movie. And part of that is because they had lined up to shoot it a certain way. And then they fired the directors, kept the crew, and then had the director direct basically a different movie. With all of the key lighting and rigging setups of the former movie, which was set up a certain way, certain genres, certain delivery, and then they're like, now use all that to do this. It'd be like, imagine if you had set up, for Scary Movie, and then the director gets fired, and they're like, okay, now direct Scream. And you're like, well, Scream is supposed to actually be scary and tense at times. Like, this is it's not going to work. Like, people are going to laugh at it. And that's what they did with Solo, a Star Wars story. I have no idea how I freaking even got to that. Yeah, you can complain if, like, the picture is dim, and I know when the picture is dim, and I'm telling you it was dim. And so I did, and I mentioned it, and they were like, oh, well, listen here, bucko. There's a certain thing called, like, foot lambert or foot lambent or something like that, that movies have, that we specifically measure by. So, yeah, the bulbs has not been turned down to save money. The bulbs in all our projectors are checked weekly for runtime hours and changed accordingly to end of life. The bulbs run on specific foot lambert, which is maintained throughout the run of all movies. In addition, we have personal maintenance performed at least twice a year. They said sincerely, and I said, okay, I'd like to know what the specific foot lambert for projectors is measured at landmark to measure against the full future theatrical experiences. Thank you. They never got back to me. That was 5 days ago. So I'd love to know this whole foot lambert thing of, like, how a movie should be bright or dark, and figure out what the heck that is, because then I can be like, is this many Lamberts? Then we can figure out, like, a standard, because I've gone to see movies and it's like my eyes hurt. And it's like, I know movies are, like, dim, but if you watch dim movies on home theater, Solo aside, then you can get, like, still a pretty decent experience. Like, I remember I wasn't crazy about David Fincher movie. I think it was Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. That was dim. That was in a dim theater. If you watch that movie on DVD, it's a dark movie, but it still can be crisp. Like, it still should be crisp. It shouldn't be faded. And that movie was faded. And they were like, well, I don't see anything. Like, are they going to admit to me, like, oh, yeah, we tried to save money and you caught us. Whoops. It's like, no, they're not. But I'd love to know what that foot lambert thing is, because I've never heard of that before. But, you know, I'm like, it totally sounds legit. So, you know, we're going to follow the source to wherever it may lead. Getting on with it. Yeah, so I got in an argument on Twitter with another Catholic who, was like, this movie was profoundly disturbing and disturbed me as a Catholic. And I'm like, oh, okay. A Catholic is gonna, like, wear their Catholic armor and, like, have an opinion different than me to make it seem like all critics have this feeling. Now, I can't find this, and I'm wondering, did that guy block me? And I would imagine that he did. Yes, he did. Okay, then. That's why I can't find it. Because me and him disagreed. But he's like, this is woke ideology. All the conservatives are evil in this movie, and all the liberals are good. And my counter argument to that was, all of the characters in that movie are, like, equally flawed. And the whole nothing is what it seems turnout reveals them to be, in a way, all of these cardinals equally scandalous, which is to say that they're not really that scandalous at all. It's just the perception of scandal. And the decision that a certain character makes, whether it was good or not, is irrelevant, because the movie has correctly established the character's moral view as being compromised. So it doesn't matter if they're making the right decision or the wrong decision. If they're making, like, the right decision, it's irrelevant, because we've already shown that he is flawed. So he can safely make the wrong decision and have it be accepted by the audience. Like, it's like when a stupid character does something that makes complete sense to them, the audience will accept it. But it's not as if the movie is like, oh, these characters are infallible. Here is a character making the right choice. So that handling of that I thought was very skilled. And I saw this movie with my grandmother, and I hadn't gone to see a movie with my grandmother since Madagascar and Monster House. So it was really nice to see another movie. She really enjoyed and had time. She's a dedicated lifelong Catholic, and she, is, I would say, a conservative person. And enjoyed the movie. Had no qualms. I had no qualms. And, I'm not as free, liberal, progressive. I mean, I'm definitely more so than a lot of my friends and some members of my family, but I'm not off the deep end. I'm right at the tiptoe, right as my head is going underwater. I like to kick off the bottom and come back up for air sometimes. So just keep that in mind. I'm sure if you're listening to this, when you watch Conclave, you'll be like, I get it, and you'll either be like, wasn't for me, or you'll be like, yeah, that was me. That was a good movie. But it's a good water cooler movie. Like, it's all still kind of at arm's length. It's not like super edgy or super controversial, but it's like enough to earn its spot. It's a well done, professionally done movie. And it's funny, I somewhat revisited the movie Civil War, which is my number one film of the year. And I'm like, I wonder if this ages better, in Trump's America again. Now that it's over. My mom watched it and she was like, these characters were stupid. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. They were stupid. Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of weak on the movie's part, but like still works for the metaphor and stuff like that. But yeah, it was funny because I'm like, would this movie gain extra relevance and get nominated for Best Picture? And it's like, nope. But I still like it. So yeah, I mentioned last week music by John Williams. That was good. I watched The Quest, which is from 1996. I didn't rank it because I was sitting at my computer while my dad was watching it on TV, and I was just, looking over. And it comes from a time when, in the mid-90s, around the time right before the Mummy movies were made, where there was a lot of budget being put into these adventure movies, even if they weren't like that good. Like, this is about a guy, Jean-Claude Van Damme, who enters like a fighting tournament so they can steal a golden dragon. And it's funny how it has like good sets, like really good sets, like good costuming, and a great score by Randy Edelman. So it's just funny. It's like the most forgettable movies from like the 90s have like really great scores, which I just kind of love. It's like nobody cared. Like, nobody told Randy Edelman that like, hey man, this movie isn't, like, don't bother and stuff. Like, he's doing it because he loves it. That's why I find it kind of like sad when you see this argument a lot of times of like, nobody will care, so don't do a good job. It's kind of bothersome. But like, The Quest reminded me of a time in the 90s when people didn't take movies too seriously, and they could be ridiculous and fun and goofy adventures, and maybe nobody will ever see it, but it was fun that it was made. Because, there'll be times when you can watch something, for like 2 hours or however long the movie is. In this case, the movie is, I don't like how they organize this though. This movie is it going to show me 95 minutes? Yeah. Yeah, absolute background watch. I didn't rate it because I wasn't paying attention on it. It didn't have my active attention, so I don't count a movie. Like, if I'm sitting in the chair, I've made the decision to sit in the chair and like face the movie. That counts. Even if I'm on my phone like half the time, like, it still counts. I've made the decision to watch the movie as my primary activity. And if the movie, wants to take its attention and stuff, then I'll watch it. But like, if I'm just looking to, kill time or want to watch a movie, then, I'll put something on. But I don't like put something on and then walk in and out around and fold laundry and turn my head away and stuff. Like, that's too little of watching a movie. my rule of thumb is really like you have to watch kind of like 80% of a movie. I could hear arguments for 75, but I'll say 85% of a movie. You can't miss more than like 20%. Though back in the day, you can catch like miss the first 45 minutes of a movie and like watch the rest of it and like keep watching. You're like, oh, that was really good. And then you look for years to try and find the beginning of it and you never do. But you still like that counts as watching a movie. But that was yesteryear when we didn't have phones and stuff like that. Now you got to watch like 80% of a movie in order for it to count. But like, who cares? Like my Letterboxd account could get wiped away tomorrow and I wouldn't care that much. I'd stop doing it. But I don't mind the diary. You'll learn a little about yourself rereading these reviews. 3 stars I gave to Kill. It's a decent Midnight Madness movie from 2023 when it premiered, and it takes from, Train to Busan and Snowpiercer and John Wick, and it's just about this Indian guy goes on a train to New Delhi. There's another Indian guy, and he has like an evil family, and there's like a blood feud going on there. There's a little bit of subtext one could argue about, but like some good fights. It's distinguished, it's memorable, more so than its title, which is a bad title. It's just called Kill. And he kills 40 people in this movie, and the body count is higher than that, like overall, because there's a lot of killing. Fine edition, decent action movie to put on. I like how it's Indian, I think Hindu, or Hindi, sorry, because Hindu is the religion and Hindi is like the culture. But like it's a decent Hindi action movie. They make some attempt to speak, English or in a way that's like not broken, but like within the realm of like that language or whatever, where it's like, hey, appreciate them making an effort. Like it's not bad voiceover, kind of thing. It's kind of like when you add a bit of Latin to your words and stuff like that. Speaking of which, there was a point in Conclave where I was worried because there's no subtitles, or subtitles hadn't come up yet, and somebody speaks Latin. I'm like, crap, is this going to, like, did they forget subtitles on this? Because that happened once before when I went to see Cloud Atlas. They left the subtitles on, and then, a lot of times when I watch subtitles at home, especially on Amazon or Paramount Plus, they screw up the subtitles. They forget to put subtitles on, so I'm like leaving them on or constantly turning on and off the closed captions. Very annoying that I can't trust presentations to be like proper anymore. Makes me uncomfortable. But anyways, had that happened, it would have been fine because my grandmother was taught Latin in school and knows Latin. So, and the direction was strong enough that you could follow along, but, it's a bummer you can't trust the subtitles anymore. But I followed up Kill with Killer Heat. I watched part of it, and then it was really going through the motions. I realized Joseph Gordon-Levitt has done quite a few noirs now. He did The Lookout, he did Brick, and so he's kind of like Mr. Noir, and it's Noir-vember for those who are counting. It's also National Write a Novel Month, novel for November, which I've done a few years, which means that I have to get back, because I promised myself once I finished the Honor review, which I finished yesterday night, promised myself once I finished that I was going to go back to writing my screenplay, and I don't quite feel done yet. Like, do I want to play another video game? Do I want to watch more movies that I want to cross off my list? Am I waiting on Black Ops still? And it's like, I got to remember that this is like, like it's a side hustle that I got to remember it as. So I got to keep doing it on the side. That doesn't mean don't do it at all. That doesn't mean clear my schedule and make it my main thing. No, I got to keep it on the side. But I wanted to do another episode of the podcast, so I continued with that. Killer Heat also stars Shailene Woodley, decent actress, currently just known for her divergent scream on TikTok where she jumps off a train or jumps off a cliff. She does a lot of jumping in that series. She is arguably better in the Divergent series, I would say, than Jennifer Lawrence is in the Hunger Games series, because Jennifer Lawrence was a bit miscast as like a prickly, not fun person, and she is a very lovable, huggable, funny person, very warm. So her is like an impression of somebody who's not easy to get along with and stuff. Whereas like Tris Pryor is kind of like equal, which is her character in Divergent. I can't believe that came to me so easily. The protagonist of Divergent. I guess because Tris Pryor is like a much cooler, slicker name than Katniss Everdeen, but like, or Shailene Woodley. But anyways, the Divergent movies, Tris is a good character because cast as is it cast as? I'm trying to think of. I'm getting into a grammatical trap here, but Shailene Woodley plays Tris, and Shailene is like, she could join the band, like she's nerdy enough to do that, like her character Amy Finnicky in The Spectacular Now, which I like quite a bit. Like she's kind of like, you buy her as a band geek, but you buy her as like somebody who could be a popular girl, and stuff like that. But you buy her as somebody who could be like a preacher's daughter or something like that. And here she's like in a bit of a noir, and yeah, like she's given a bunch of good performances, and this one seems kind of phoned in. Like she has a big moment where she's crying, and I just like didn't buy it for the character. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Jogo, JGO, you know, or Ghost of Jordan Levitt, as I've mistakenly called him before, but I thought it was funny, so I kept doing it. They're like fine, they're going through the motions. Richard Madden, aka Rob Stark, who, I kid you not, has an evil twin in this movie. You just don't know which one's which. He gives the best performance out of those three in this movie. And it's like, I got bored of it, shut it off, but I continued it the next night because, you know, I'm mostly completionist. Like, again, I bought a game a year ago and then just finished it now, you know. I started a movie that I wasn't that interested in 2 months ago, and I finished it now. So, yeah, I'm a completionist. So I finished the movie, and when I pick it up, Killer Heat, which is the worst title of all time for a movie. Like, yeah, there's a killer. Does it fall? Is that Joseph Gordon-Levitt? No. Heat? He's not even like a cop. So, terrible title, Amazon. But anyways, Richard Madden, best performance in that. I drop it, I pick it up. It gets interesting immediately as I pick it up. And it's like, oh, this is good. Because there's a lot of movies where it's like, okay, if they actually started 20 minutes later, then they might be more interesting. And Strange Darling, which I watched after that, plays with that quite well, although it's like too over the top. But anyways, Killer Heat starts to pick up, and then it loses it. Like, it loses the intrigue. And it's like, this movie was unnecessary. It's very clearly a novel adapted into a movie. No style, no flair, no nothing. Got some decent actors in it, but like, it's like, it might be a movie somebody watches or you watch and you forget about. Like, it's not the reason movies are made. It's not even going to be on any of these actors' top 10 resumes, except for Richard Madden, who I'm pulling for a bit. Like, he's solid. He's a solid actor. He was rumored to be in the running for James Bond. Right now, he is, like, it's funny because he seems young, but he'd be older now. Because remember, he was Rob Stark. Like, Game of Thrones started in 2011. So Richard Madden now is 38. He's prematurely gray in this, but I think that's like, he has an edge to him. I buy him as James Bond. But, you know, people are like, he might just be too whitewashed or whatever. Although somebody said about James Bond, because I've been watching a lot of Pierce Brosnan clips. I rewatched the clip of GoldenEye and some, you know, stuff from World Is Enough and Die Another Day and stuff. And it's just, I love Pierce Brosnan. Halle Berry even said that, like, she had a bad streak of men, and like, just working with Pierce Brosnan restored her faith in men. Just a guy who projects decency and stuff. Like, that role in Mrs. Doubtfire is a role that, like, would be a skeevy character, and he just brings so much decency and charm to it that, like, he, like, makes people on repeat viewings kind of like him better than Robin Williams, which is a feat. But yeah, 2.5 stars to that movie. But I think of Pierce Brosnan as, like, the default Bond, probably because I grew up with, like, GoldenEye and Tomorrow Never Dies and stuff. That was my era. And I look at Daniel Craig as, like, a deconstruction of Bond, which Redditor said best this week. But anyways, on the 8th, I saw Strange Darling. I gave it 2.5 stars. Conceptually, it's fine. It makes a big deal of being shot on 35mm, which I don't think a movie should do, because I don't think shooting on 35mm, when done right, it looks nice. This movie didn't do it. It had Giovanni Ribisi, surprisingly, who produced it. Good for him for getting into something new, but he's the cinematographer of this movie. I don't like the way it's colored at all. I find it honestly like an ugly, garish-looking movie. But it has a kind of, like, interesting flip on, like, male and female roles in a way that turns out to be, like, a criticism of wokeness, and that starts to, like, seep through or something. It's like, oh, it's a criticism of how women are perceived versus reality, which is, like, very noirish, but then doesn't follow noir conventions. And then it's like a thriller, but then it's also like a Tarantino-esque thriller, but it doesn't, like, have a strong enough commentary to go along with it. And then there are some moves in it that feel like unearned. So a combination of, it's a bit too much style, it's an overdose of style, which is fine, you're allowed to do, you know, if you're being inspired, like it got me through the movie. I gave it 2.5 stars. I remember it being immediately hyped when it opened in limited release at the end of August. And yeah, I wonder what the top reviews on Letterboxd say. Because I just called it a mildly interesting, shamelessly derivative Quentin Tarantino-esque story. Good construction, far too pretentious, slow, boring, and without significant character depth for the time we have to spend with these unpleasant characters. I honestly found it to be an ugly-looking film, and as Bill Simmons would said, it could have lost 20 minutes. Like any movie could lose 20 minutes. Overrated on social media, but I didn't hate watching it, and I'm interested in what JT Molnar makes next. What's the top like? You know, because the Strange Darling, the setup of this movie is nothing is what it seems when a twisted one-night stand spirals into a serial killer's vicious murder spree. Oh yeah. Reviews from friends. Shooting a movie on 35mm is cool. Announcing that you shot it on 35mm in an opening title card is deeply uncool. I agree. And then, yeah, same thing. The best cooking scene. Yeah, I don't know. The popular reviews. My audience was dead and indifferent during every scene until they used an entire stick of butter to cook 3 eggs, at which point people loudly lost their minds. Long one, I'm not reading that. Review by Cobb, 5 stars. She says, Willa Fitzgerald, I will get you that Oscar. No, you won't. Recent reviews. Blah, blah, blah. Media done a good job. Yeah, who cares? I don't want to say that because it's spoilers. I love not knowing where a movie is going. That's good. Yeah. Oh, that was Patrick Willems who said that? Quietly has the best cooking scene of the year. Anyway, this movie came out at the end of August, released in theaters, and, like, people were like, oh, you gotta go see this movie. There was a TikTok campaign. I remember Ed Begley Jr.'s daughter was on TikTok talking about it, and, you know, people on Twitter, and it was, like, immediately like, I don't know, guys. Like, I doubt it's as good as people say, and it wasn't, but it was entertaining. moving on. We are up to the Deadpool, which features Jim Carrey's first performance. I watched this 2 nights ago. It's about it's a Dirty Harry movie. It stars Clint Eastwood, who is kind of looking after a film director played by Liam Neeson, who, by the way, said he was almost fired from the movie because he was taller than Clint Eastwood, but irrelevant. There is a person going around killing famous people as part of a Deadpool game. You know, like the Deadpool is where there's a pool of people and you bet on who's going to die next. You know, it's an actual thing. It's an interesting concept. The Dirty Harry character is great. You know, a lot of great one-liners like, you're shit out of luck and stuff. Like, just a great character. Dirty Harry has to come back. Like, it'd be one thing that they could do would be if they did a story about like a Nepo baby played by Scott Eastwood who gets a job on the force because his dad's a big deal, and you don't have to have Clint Eastwood play his dad. Have someone else or have it go and explain. But he then gets involved in like a police shooting of someone who like might or might not be an innocent like black guy. And it gets embroiled in controversy, and he's like partially a hero among the cop community, but like reviled from others. And it's like him learning to get into his own. We've seen this story like 10 or 15 times. Like Training Day does a bit of that. There's another movie on the tip of my tongue. Oh yeah, Dark Blue, that is also like does that. So it's like rich territory, but like how do you make it into a Dirty Harry movie? You just kind of make a detective noir and stuff. Maybe I'm thinking of something that's just an original movie and doesn't need to be Dirty Harry at all, but like Dirty Harry was originally made as a response to the political correctness of the 70s and like a reversion back to, you know, being edgy and kind of pushing limits in a way that's brilliant. That's another movie where I'd love to see S. Craig Zoller do that. He already kind of did it with Dragged Across Concrete, but you know, I'd like to see him be in a major movie. Is basically what I'd like. So, anyways, the Deadpool is like fine. I said solid concept, good cast, good music by Lalo Griffin, who did the music for Rush Hour and the Mission Impossible theme. It's well filmed to boot. It just runs out of steam and it has a lackluster final villain. The top review, the most popular one, by Matt Singer. If I can get to him. Why does this guy sound so friggin' familiar? Screen crash. I gotta look this guy up. I hate when I like look at and know a name and I'm like, where are they from? But I cover a lot of I should give myself a break. I cover a lot of topics on this blog and podcast. Okay. I was worried he was gonna be like an awards pundit and that I hated and fought with on Twitter. But he wasn't. So this is the most popular review. He's reviewed it twice? My gosh, man. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, jokey. So, Matt Singer writes, it's not easy to make a laugh-out-loud comedy about a brutal, rule-breaking cop who guns down a ton of people, but apparently it is possible. Starring Clint Eastwood as Groucho Marx, if Groucho Marx scowled a lot and carried a magnum along with his inexhaustible supply of ridiculous one-liners. You forgot your fortune cookie. It says you're shit out of luck. Yeah, anyway, that's just a description, though. That's not like a witty review of it. Darn. Nobody has a clever one-liner. I thought this is what Letterboxd had become. Well, somebody's got to come up with one. That's for sure. I'll just review another one by this woman named Allison M. She just says, at times this movie dances between really fun and really stupid. Supporting Clint Eastwood is the magnificent Patricia Clarkson, who, by the way, outside of this review, plays a newswoman. And I found this movie like really entertaining for the first half, and then starts to run out of ideas towards the end. But anyway, back to our review. There is also an extremely small role featuring James Carey as a druggy musician turned actor. Jim Carrey's part is anything but comedic, and it's funny to think how differently his career could have gone. I agree. Jim Carrey is like excellent in like the 2 scenes that he's like in. So like that's really cool to see that. But yeah, the Deadpool is let's see how many Dirty Harry movies it is removed. Because I want to, that's relevant to, no, not the Deadpool comics. I said the Deadpool movie. Oh, great. How is it? No, not that. Frig. Now I have to search. Wait, did that already come up? Yes, the Deadpool movie Clint Eastwood is what I have to search. Great. Ain't Google grand. Okay. It is the 5th in the Dirty Harry series. Is it the last one? Yeah, I know. 5th and final. So it was the very last one. I see. Yeah. He looks a bit older here. That's why. Okay. And it's only 91 minutes, which I liked how short it was. Yeah. This is also the movie where Clint Eastwood says, opinions are like assholes. Everyone has one. But yeah, this was the last one. It did okay. Yeah. Eastwood publicly announced he had no interest in acting in another Dirty Harry film. In 2000, he jokingly spoke about potential sequels. Dirty Harry 6, Harry is retired. He's standing in a stream fly fishing. He gets tired of using the pole and ba-boom. Or Harry is retired and he catches bad guys with his walker. I'd actually see that, But yeah, so I've seen 1 and 5. I've seen bits of 2, which is Magnum Force. And then the Enforcer and Sudden Impact. The Sudden Impact is the Clint Eastwood one, which features the phrase, go ahead and make my day. Yeah, that's the one that I want to see. Yeah. So, it was solid. Kind of ridiculous. The last time, and it's from what year? 88. So, yeah. I'd love for Dirty Harry to come back in some way. Okay, so I followed that up with the Outlaw Josey Wales, which was one of Clint's westerns I'd heard about a lot. It is very inspiring of Red Dead Redemption. It's fascinating, the Rockstar guys are very big on like movies and want things to be cinematic, and this movie is just like a template for that. I say in my review on Letterboxd that westerns like this are just so easy to look at. There's nothing in this movie that hasn't been done better before or since, but the origin story where they shoot with real fire, the chase leading to the ferry crossing, which remind me of Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, the speeches before the gunfights. You can tell Clint Eastwood really respects the genre. This is a movie that he directed back in 1976, and it got a sequel without him that he didn't direct either. And I don't know, there's something about the movies like this or The Quest where they don't do anything great at all, but I like them for some reason. I don't know if it's the texture of it or the pacing or something, or I just really like seeing the actors or the characters or the sentiment is there, but there's something in movies. And I remember James Franco talked about this, about the movie The Room, of like, The Room is the worst movie of all time. Why has it endured? And James Franco said, he's like, I think you can tell that the, writer, director, and star Tommy Wiseau really cared about this movie. Like, he put effort and thought into every frame. And I have to say, I agree. When I do a review. Sometimes I'll like do a review and I'll put a lot of effort into it. And it will do well and be viewed by more people. And I'll be like so shocked. It's like, oh, really? Like my millennial reviews 48 Hours with Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy is like one of my top performing articles of all time. Because I had a really good idea and I wrote it really well. But I was like surprised that a review of a movie where fatalistically, and I mean by fate, I don't mean by death, that, oh, and by the way, before I forget, in Conclave, the priest or cardinal in that movie has a really great sermon about, certainty is a sin because it is the enemy of faith, which brings us down on our path. And when you are certain of something, you become closed-minded of everything else. Similar to how Kamala Harris, lost because the Democrats were certain they were going to win and didn't take Trump seriously. And there we go, second in a row. So, it was a good sermon in that movie. The kind of like, oh man, if only my priest was like this smart and this clever all the time, it could come up with like really brilliantly written homilies like that. But yeah, really, really good thoughts. But yeah, there's something about making movies where or art in general, where when you put genuine thought and effort into something, it kind of escapes being good or bad. And that's kind of what Outlaw Josey Wales does. Like, story-wise, it's a fail. Just because it's like, again, seen it all before. There's nothing different. Technically, it's nothing impressive. But I don't feel like Clint Eastwood thought he was wasting his time making this movie. I don't think he intended to waste the time of the people who were watching this movie. And a film being, nonverbal art, I feel like he communicates to us too that he feels that way successfully. And as someone who has done that successfully with my own writing, I have to agree. It's like I wouldn't recommend nor not recommend this movie and be like, oh, that's bad or whatever, because I know it's a movie that like a lot of people like. But it's like not a movie where somebody would watch it and hate it. Like, it's not a hateable movie. So it's overall a positive force. And that's the movie that I watched last night. And then I followed it up with Will and Harper, which, again, I gave 1 star. Which sometimes I feel like I'm being mean. But, I'm more critical of movies that, like, waste my time. And this felt like a movie that was pretentious of, like, okay, a guy is trans and he goes on a road trip. Why should I care? And the movie just assumes that I would care. It doesn't really make an effort, It's about 2, like, wealthy guys. One of them is, like, very famous that can afford to road trip across from New York to California and then go back. And, like, yeah, it feels, like, very privileged about its identity and stuff, and that's why I didn't like it. But yeah, I am going to finish this pod episode by just going through a few quick news stories I didn't want to miss. Netflix's offices in France were raided for it's a part of a preliminary investigation which opened in 2022 to look into the claims of aggravated tax fraud in concealed work in an organized conspiracy. This is from The Hollywood Reporter. Eaton Vlessing, who I should follow because I love it when, hey, Canada Bureau Chief, good for him, support Canada. I'm going to follow this guy on Twitter. Hopefully, I do not say anything to piss off, because Twitter is so good for making you see like the worst in people, and like you get in a fight with somebody in like 5 sentences. So yeah, this guy hasn't tweeted in 2 years though. So Yeah. Anyways, Netflix is a tax cheat, apparently, at least in their French offices, and they're going to pay. So, I felt good that there was some accountability. This story came out like the night after the election was called. So that felt good. I'm like, yes, work is still being done. Because, again, the whole concept of, like, Donald Trump being found criminally guilty and then, like, he becomes president, so I guess we just stop interrogating him, sentencing him. He was, like, his trial was already found. He was already found guilty. And then he was found guilty in May, and then he was supposed to be sentenced in July, and then July's like, oh, we need a few more months to think about it, because the Supreme Court said that, Official President Secrets Act, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, well, he wasn't president when he did this at all, so it doesn't need to be thought about. And then September comes around, the guy's like, oh, well, it's close to the election. I want to be fair, so I'm going to delay until after the election. And then now that it's after the election, people are like, well, he won, so it'd be very inconvenient to send a criminal to jail, so I guess we'll, recommend that, recommend that we wind down this investigation. And it's like, okay, well, if you do that, you undermine people's faith in the courts, because it's like, this guy was found guilty by a jury of peers. People, like, did their civic duty, put their necks out on the line for this trial. And how are you going to reward them? By, like, throwing their sacrifice in the trash? Very nice, Joe Biden. I'm putting this on Joe Biden because he is still president, and Merrick Garland is Attorney General, and his subordinate is the guy leading this investigation. And so, like, I would instruct Joe Biden to fire Merrick Garland if he wants to, like, if they have any attitudes about, like, preserving democracy and, like, letting transition with dignity or some bullshit. The guy was found guilty. Like, give him 2 months of, like, he did a campaign cover-up. Like, that's what Richard Nixon resigned for. Give him 2 months to serve, or, like, 30 days or something, and then have him get out before he, like, seriously, like, he could just go, like, book him for next week, like, book him for, like, the 15th, have him serve 60 days, and then have him get out before inauguration. He can do all that stuff from, like, prison, and then he's, arguably done the minimum to pay his debt to society, or say, hey, we're freezing this. When he gets out in 4 years, he's for sure going to prison, because it's just so disrespectful to every other American citizen that, like, they don't have to follow any of that. Yeah, gossip. Gossip. That's what I'm reading about now. Anyways, Xbox 360 related sign-in issues. 360 players are having trouble connecting online because log in with an app password now. And I'm going to get into this in a second because this is really annoying. It's already annoying that you can't turn on another Xbox without using your phone. Like, that's very annoying. I got what I thought was movie tickets out of a cereal box. And then I discovered, because, that used to be a thing. Cineplex was having an advertisement for their Cheerios. And it was, hey, get free Cineplex ticket with your cereal box. And I remember when they used to do that stuff. And I'm like, oh, cool. They're bringing it back. Great. And they used to give out 2 tickets in the cereal box. They'd have it on paper or cardboard or something. And then they're like, oh, that's not healthy. Let's not put it in with the Cheerios or whatever. Which used to be fun. By the way, that was very fun when you'd put out, it's like, oh, wait, don't pour on the milk yet. And then they're like, oh, no. Like, that's bad. We can't mix that in with the food. It's cardboard. We'll put it on the cardboard. We'll have them cut out the box. And that was inconvenient, but that was fine. Because you'd take the box and cut out the box and stuff. And then it was like, oh, send them your email and postal code and an address and stuff online and fill this out, and then you'll get the 2 tickets instantly to like print off. And that was cool, because it was one of the first things that I like did online, where I'd get a newsletter, I'd enter a contest. That's basically what I did as a kid. I'd just enter a lot of contests, and that was really fun to me. And so I did that, and then it was, I don't know, really fun, really nostalgic, just thinking about it now. And then it changed. I'll tell you what it's at now, is that I saw this, and I'm like, oh, cool, movie tickets, awesome. And then it says, buy 2, not 1, buy 2 cereal boxes to get 1 movie ticket. And I'm like, crap. So, wasn't able to do it because it's like, oh, well, I got these on 2 receipts. That doesn't count. I have to buy 2 at the same time. So, somebody from my family, actually, like where I live with my parents, so they got 2. We stocked up, got the 2. Awesome. I'm gonna go fill this out to get this movie ticket because I love the movies. Haven't been to Cineplex in a long time, but this will be good. This will be fun. And I go out and I fill out it asks for a photo of like the cereal box and the proof of purchase showing that there's 2, that we bought 2 cereal boxes. And it's, by the way, only giving you 1 ticket. Like, gone are the 2 tickets. It's just giving you 1 ticket for Cineplex. And I'm like, well, okay, well, I'll go see Heretic or something myself, or I'll get a, discount and then buy 1 ticket for someone else, and that'll work. Cool. So I'm filling it out, and then I send it to them in email. And I get an email code. And it's not instant. It's 3 days. I have to wait 3 days. And then it shows up in my spam folder. I have to mark it as not spam. And then I look at it, and it's a big long code. And it's like, fill out this code on the Cineplex app or online on our website in order to get your movie ticket. So then I'm like, okay, well, I haven't downloaded the app in a while. The app sucks for Cineplex. So I'll go to the website and log back in because I haven't logged in forever. I have so many points. I go to the website and log back in, and it's like, oh, whoa. It's been a while since you've logged back in. Enter your password. I know it's one of 3 passwords, but it doesn't show me what I'm typing. So I type in, I miss it. I type in, I miss it. I type in, I miss it. And then instead of locking me out, it's like, you're locked out of this account. We've sent you an email. But they didn't just lock me out temporarily for like an hour or something. It sends me an email that says, we've basically deleted your password, and regardless of if you did this or not, we've reset the password for you. And you have to reset it again and reset your own password. So I'm like, crap, fine, I'll reset my password. So I reset my password on Cineplex that I haven't used in years. And after resetting my password, it says, oh, well, now there's mandatory 2-factor authentication. So you have to give us your cell phone number to collect this 1 ticket. And that was like too far of like, I do not like all this crap they give you about like, we respect your privacy. It's like, if you really respected my privacy, you wouldn't ask, is the truth. And like, I don't want to give my phone number to, like, I understand buying tickets online and authenticating and blah, 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 but I don't want to give my phone number to a company that I don't trust. And again, they're supposed to be giving me something as like a gift, and it's like a partnership, but it's like, what's the partnership here? They're partnering with General Mills for like a phishing scam is what this basically is like, I give them all of my information. I give them my phone number. I sign up. They know exactly who I am and where I am. And in exchange for getting a ticket that probably doesn't work for all showtimes, that works for like a specific non-premium, non-3D, non-IMAX, because they don't pay for IMAX, so non-AVX showtime that probably doesn't work for movies on opening weekend even. Maybe even can't be used for Discount Tuesday, I don't know. And it's one ticket. And then by the time I use it, what's gonna happen is that like I'll go, and let's say it's a print off of a ticket. I'll go to the Cineplex, and then I'll give them the ticket, and then the minimum wage worker who I give it to will have absolutely no idea what they're looking at. And I don't mean like that they're too old for tickets and stuff. No, I mean that when I was at TIFF and I gave people my physical ticket, they looked at me like I did something wrong. Of like, oh, that's odd. A tangible thing that you own? What's that about? And they eyed me with suspicion because if somebody buys a ticket, that means they can give it to someone else. That's not the person who bought it. And, they're really worried about people going to the movies. Like, geez, like, why do I have to give this much information to see a movie? Like, what's with all the security here? It's ridiculous. This is how ridiculous companies have gotten. They've trusted nothing. And I really wanted to go to the movies. Wouldn't mind seeing a movie at Cineplex. I wanted to do the work. I was willing to fill everything out. But it's like, it's asking for all of my information and tracking me in exchange for giving me something that was like $7. And it doesn't even trust me to have it on my own. So it's like, no thank you. I don't want to pay. I'd rather pay $7.95 for a ticket on my own terms than like spend what's now like a half hour trying to figure out and like fix my account for stuff. And now that they're all like collecting scene points and stuff, it's so stupid. Like, it doesn't matter to me that it's like a better collection of points than, American Air Miles was, it's just because Air Miles, you could just, hey, here's the thing, you scan it, and you don't get very many points, but it's just like, do it when you do it, I switched to Scotiabank originally because I wasn't a fan of the ATM fees, and I liked the scene point stuff, but then they switched it from 3 points for every $1 to 1 point for every $3, and then they upped the charges on the card. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'll just switch to a regular card. And then Cineplex renovated and put bars right in the middle of the railing up high when you lean back in the seat. And I just won't have that. So, yeah. Last thing I wanted to talk about was the TikTok ban, where Canada, in the land of Justin Trudeau, did their own half-assed TikTok ban, where they're like, TikTok is banned from operating in Canada. So they took down their business in Vancouver and Toronto, and then allowed TikTok to keep running on the App Store, and then said that it's like a security issue, gave no details, and then left it at that. And yeah, that's pretty stupid. Pretty poor handling, because it's like, while kicking out the one Canadians who we're giving jobs to is like a pretty bad way of doing it. Like, there's got to be more here. I'll tell you what I would do is I would just set up a committee or an investigation to investigate stuff separately from like the RCMP and stuff like that. I would have like a cooperative investigation with like CSIS and RCMP, and then like movie people, and ask interviews and like conduct research. And it's like, that's how you would do it. And then give it a PSA and say, hey, I've noticed when I scroll through TikTok, there's a lot of like videos that hate America and hate Canada and spread misinformation. That seems pretty bad and motivated by foreign entities. Because, man, if there's one thing I noticed from the most recent election, it's that there is a lot of fake information getting you to distrust government leaders. And that to me screams Russian and foreign assets. But it's hard for people to read. You know, they want to get you to distrust institutions, and I don't mean like credible government institutions, although that's a big part of it. I mean like distrust broadcasters, which we all know how they lie to us anyways, but we know how they lie to us. You know, they're still held to standards. Like, you can sue 60 Minutes, you can sue CBS, you can sue NBC, you can sue ABC, but you can also call into them at any time. You can write to them. You can be a part of their board meetings. I kid you not. They have quarterly reports where they have to answer to public shareholders. They can be sued. They can be sued of what they say online. They are free to access with an antenna signal, and online and other ways too. They employ many people. Many people from our country. And I'm speaking in terms of like to my American audience, because my American audience is bigger than Canadian audiences. But like, you could do that with the CBC and CTV too. So it's just funny to me that like a lot of this fake news is like, you know, somebody shares a really convincing story on Instagram, and it's like, I'm sorry. Remember the days when in school they told us in order for something to be legitimate, you had to get it from 3 different sources to confirm? And now people are, it's like, oh, my buddy Jerry shared this like story, look at this video. And it's like something that is like clearly AI manipulated or photoshopped or something, followed by like a picture with text over it that's written like a meme. Like, it's a picture with like a clever one-liner, and people are like, yep, Epstein pedophile. And it's like literally any celebrity that's like ever existed. And it's like, okay, like, I'm willing to go with you on this, but like, based on what? And it's like that whole Jake Paul thing of like, the people who share those stories are like, laugh it off as a joke when you call them on their shit. And it's like, I'm sorry, there are people who like get paid to do this for a living. It's really annoying to be sent something if it's not funny. Because, you know, even if something's completely false, there's something this insult comic Anthony Jeselnik will say of like, nobody is going to go after you for being funny, for making something funny. If you tell a completely fake, false, lying story, but it's funny, people will laugh, you know? That's not the crime. But if you're trying to do it to make yourself seem smarter or better or be a hero, like, that's not going to fly. So there's a lot of people now who have like agendas where they want to leak something to make themselves seem smart or popular, or they have an agenda to profit from it when they're in like a compromised position, like they're selling ads on a fake news story, which is very annoying to me, just because I have to like correct it. I'm like, is this actually true? That's very annoying to me, just because I find, again, life is short. It's a waste of time. Fake news is just like a waste of time. It gets you to think about stuff that's like not true. And worse, stuff that you have no stake in. Like, when people were scrambling about, you know, who was the guy who attempted murder at Donald Trump, and it was like turned out to be like Italian soccer announcer or something like that. Ridiculous. The people who reported that, like, what is their penalty for sharing stuff that they know to be false and like fake propaganda? And I know that people can share sometimes things that are like wrong. Like, I remember CNN, when there was a shooting on Parliament Hill, they said that there were shootings at the Rideau Center, at the Rideau Mall, and that turned out to be fake. But they updated the story, you know, when they had more details and stuff like that. That's still really bad, and equally as bad as a lot of the stuff that they see. But CNN doesn't do that as often as you would think, because they are civilly and can be held criminally liable. I mean, look no further than the Fox broadcaster being sued for, lies about voting machines. It got to the point where they were repeatedly told don't, given multiple warnings. And then Fox was like, okay, but Tucker Carlson was like, well, I'm going to keep reporting it anyway because I'm getting, news and ratings. And Fox was like, oh, okay. And then Fox got hit with such a massive legal bill that they were like, okay, we're cutting Tucker loose. And then they paid a giant $700 million fine and got it tax deducted and cut him loose because he wasn't useful to them anymore, because he just lied. And that's what's annoying to me. People who lie to you about news, find out who they are because they are useless to you. They are giving you bad information. They are not being truthful. And I just think, as somebody who takes news seriously, that there should be a severe penalty for people who spread disinformation that is like knowing, like not being misinformed. It is purposefully misinforming somebody. And I think there should be a severe penalty for that, because these people suffer no consequences for being wrong. Like when your friend says something and they're wrong about it, like you rag on them and stuff. But now that everybody is social media connected and stuff like that, when people are wrong, you don't know the person who wronged you, and they're just like, whatever, man. Like, I just can't abide by that anymore. We're so far past that. And, and to bring it full circle, it's like, that's why I want Joe Rogan not to interview so many political people, because it just makes it serious, more like serious. And he's not really willing, like demonstrated that he really wants to take it that seriously and really wants to like be on his stuff when he's interviewing JD Vance. Like, how many times did JD Vance have to say, well, I don't know about that, I'll have to check it out, or I can't really say about this because I don't know. And it's just like, there's a good 20 minutes of that interview, if you've seen it, where JD Vance just basically has to deflect, or he follows up with Joe Rogan and Joe Rogan has to deflect, and it's like conversation that goes nowhere. And to me, unless it's a creative endeavor, like you're making a movie or something good like that, that's cool. Or you're being funny and making people laugh. Again, like, you can lie all you want if you're funny. Like, look at Donald Trump, funniest president of all time. And that's what people like about him. So my whole point is just like that. If you're going to be funny, be funny. If you're going to be serious, be serious. But don't be serious and tell me that you're joking, because then you're just wasting my time. And that's FilmGamer podcast for this week. We'll be back with number 47 next week. Thank you for tuning in.